What's up, everyone? Happy Friday, and welcome to the game on Pax8 Live, the show where we discuss all of the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware of. It's been a long week for both Matt and I, so we've got a lot to discuss and quite a bit of news stacked up this week, so let's get right into it today.
Dom, it's great to see you, man.
It's great to see you too.
We
I'm pretty sad you get to use the Denver studio. That's pretty.
it is
pretty
nice. Yes. Other hand. I don't even want to talk about it. It's cool. I still like me. Man, it's been a busy week. You're right. You nailed it on the head. I just spent 4 days in Deadwood, South Dakota with Bo Bullock taking a class called Breaching the Cloud. And it was a very, 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 very centered on attacks that I didn't know existed, abuses that I didn't understand were there, and it's fantastic. So, and then I got to meet today with MSP in Rapid City and spend some time with their team. So it was awesome. What have you been up to this week, Dom?
I got to go to Houston, and the weather was actually perfect, which I was not expecting. And it was MLB postseason game 1 and 2 right across the street from the hotel, so that was pretty sweet. But we went to Exchange Next Gen, and I really like Next Gen because it tends to be filled with sort of higher maturity, forward-thinking MSPs. So really, really challenging and engaging boardrooms. And then we walked away with this that I'm showing you backwards.
What?
And
you got to keep
Solutions Pavilion strategy. Well,
I'm not sure how this worked out. We might need to talk
to
Bill about this. This may be a little bit of a security violation.
They've never let me put that box in my suitcase, so I don't think I'll be holding on to it for long.
I got something glass too.
You did?
Yeah, it was a giant glass boot. It holds 2 liters of alcohol. I won a cybersecurity trivia beer pong game. It was beautiful.
You didn't bring it to the show with you?
I actually got it taken. I left it in the cab, and then they had to take it back, and they're shipping it to me. It was a mistake. So it's all
fair enough.
Failing on asset management. All right, let's get right into the news. We got a few great articles. Last week was just a slugfest, right? I think you called it a walking funeral. But we actually have a good one for once, right? Europol knocks out RagnarLocker offline in a second major ransomware bust this year. That's 2 major takedowns of infrastructure and of these gangs. Law enforcement agencies have taken over RagnarLocker's group leak site in an intentionally coordinated takedown. Right. And among the agencies involved is Europol, EC3, US FBI, Germany's, I'm not even going to try, BKA, among many others. The takedown follows concerted effort from law enforcement in recent years. Like, Tom, we've seen this a couple times now, right? And I don't want to read the rest of the article. I don't have to beat this to death. But I think one of the challenges is they took down the infrastructure.
Yes.
They took down the code. I can spin up infrastructure in a few days easily, right? And I think the challenge is that we see these gangs go offline, and then rapidly we see them come back online, or other versions or other distributed groups where they've moved to, right? We saw that now in we're on Lockbit 3.0 now, I think is the iteration we're
Something
on.
Like that, yeah.
But it is a win, and it is one of those things where we are seeing and have seen for the last couple of years the feds take action. And what's interesting about it, Dom, is I was in an Uber yesterday, or it was a taxi actually. I don't do those very often. And the gentleman asked me, he goes, "So is this dark web thing real?" That was his question. He was an older gentleman. Okay. And I said, yes. And I started describing Tor, and I started describing, at least to the best I could, of how this functions cryptographically and how it works, right? And what's interesting is he goes, "Well, do they ever make mistakes, or do they ever have failures in those?" And I was like, yes, in the news article today, we have one of those, right? Presumably, where they've, things that can happen in Tor and in these threat actors' infrastructure is they can make mistakes and leak IP addresses. Right. And through Tor, instead of it coming through Tor, you actually get some things that give you your real IP addresses, which allows them to start getting warrants and following that, Dom. But it's always a good one.
Yeah, that and other, OPSEC type mistakes that tend to occur. If you're going to be a bad guy, I would say use a separate machine at least, in addition to Tor. But I will say, didn't you tell me you were studying German? I feel like you should have been able to nail that word.
No, I didn't want to fail at that word, and I didn't take enough time to read it quickly. But I appreciate you pointing out that. Yeah, I certainly should have had the phonetic capacitance.
Yeah.
All right, let's bring up the next article. What else do we have here? We got some good stuff in today. BlackCat actually has a new tactic, right? And the BlackCat ransomware gang, or Alpha V, right, is another name they're known on, surfaced in 2021. They gained notoriety because of their sophistication of their malware, right? They're using Rust, which is a newer and much faster programming language. I think that helped them be one of the fastest encryptors as well when they went to do that. They are a ransomware as a service, an affiliate model, right? And if you're not familiar with that out there, Affiliate models make it to where basically the affiliate keeps 80 to 90%, and the creator of the ransomware, the hoster of the infrastructure, the people that make this function, take their VIG, whether that's 10, 20, 30%, whatever it may be, right? The BlackCat organization, including its affiliates, has historically focused on targeting victims in the United States. However, this focus has greatly broadened over time with popularity and growth and affiliates, right? You think about that. The affiliate aspect of this is going to continue bringing in new people and new actors that want to act in different segments of the world. But one of the things that's coming up from this, and they're going to get to it here in a bit, and I just won't make the article go forever, is that they're using a new tactic, right? And it's called Munchkin is the name of this tool. And it's a Linux-based OS that runs inside of a container in the victim's machine that allows those things to work with actually externalizing to SMB and CIFS file shares, but running inside of a virtual machine, which means I'm borrowing your computer's compute and RAM and operating system functions that call out from there, but I'm not in the purview of your anti-malware and antivirus software.
Right.
I'm running in a virtualized environment, having full hook to that kernel inside there, and having almost in their mind no relationship with the OS. And so as a part of this, that makes it very hard to look at TTPs, or techniques, tactics, practices. It makes it very tough to actually do that. Comes as an ISO, which is hard to scan, right? It's just a Linux ISO. Upon running the OS, the following commands are executed, and I'm going to bet these are juicy commands. Echo root password, change password, and then a new session out to, what are they doing? So they're really just jumping in as a controller, right, Dom? Am I reading this wrong? This is just a new session out back to the host OS?
Yep.
In doing so, the malware initially changes the root password of the VM so that the one chosen by the threat actors, it subsequently generates a new terminal session via the built-in Linux utility and the malware binary named in the controller. It powers the VM off. The controller malware is hosted within the app directory along with other related files. In addition, the other related notable files include the VMOS and table 1 below. But the point being, they're doing things to continue obfuscating, to continue moving back below the purview of security tools as much as possible. Dom, does this pose any new threat?
It's microservice architecture. In it's kind of cool if you ask me. Like, not for the right reasons,
machines.
But
yeah.
Right. Like, we preach that in secure application development all the time. So, like, good on them. But to answer your question, yeah, right. Like, I think there's definitely some detection work to be done, especially if you're like a BlackPoint and you have the capability to rapidly evolve and look for these things in real time.
Yep.
But I think once that container's spun up, you're going to have a hard time seeing what's happening in there. It really depends on how the storage is mounted back into the machine. Containers have a lot of ways of doing that. I would assume that they did it smart enough to have it be its own contained file system, and then sort of relying on API calls. And the other challenge is if you mismanage containers are not, technically speaking, full VMs. So they have some weird back-end reliance on different things. And that makes them susceptible to being improperly configured, which means I can improperly configure it on purpose and allow it to interact back with the system in ways that you wouldn't necessarily want to happen. So it's using some method, and it's hard to see it in that article, but I would assume doing some sort of remote API logic into client-side code that sits in the operating system. So you put your danger code inside that container, and you put good enough looking code outside that container.
Right.
And it's probably pretty hard to detect. You're probably almost just relying on different file hashes initially and until you identify the behavior of starting a container.
Awesome. Well, I don't know that I went live like I should have on YouTube and on LinkedIn for myself, so I may have failed there. I was just checking that. Sorry, I got distracted there. Let's bring up this next article, please. All right. 600 gigs of data, 300 hours given to USCS, which is an insurance company. A ransomware group known as Knight, formerly Cyclops, back to our earlier point, right, Dom, has already carried out a cyber attack on U.S. claims, or allegedly. The Cyber Express found no reference in the USGS Cyberattack website of the insurance form. U.S. Claims Solutions is an insurance industry that offers services related to cargo and inspections, commercial loss claims, firearm appraisals, forensic. But that's a smattering of things they do there and more.
Right.
The Knight ransomware gang exfilled over 600 gigs of data allegedly from the attack. Knight threatened USCS with a deadline of 300 hours and 2 minutes for the ransomware payment on their dark web portal. The deadline of close to 12 days for the ransomware payment from the data posting, the dark web message regarding the cyber attack also noted the management firm was given 48 hours to respond to their threat, which, if you've ever been through one of these events, it begins a little bit of a dance and a cat and mouse game of negotiations. Yes, I've got it. I'm going to respond to you. Let's negotiate. I'm waiting on the insurance to come and get involved. I'm waiting on Spear Tip to come do their forensics. I'm
Right.
waiting on Coveware to come be the negotiator on ransomware or whatever it may be. Knight has also nailed BMW Munich this week from Cyclops tonight. Cyclops ransomware changed tonight with the launch of version 2 as ransomware as a service operations. The hackers, or threat actors, also said they were recruiting more cyber criminals in their group back in July 2023. So it sounds like we've got another major player starting to develop, right, and coming out. And I do remember Cyclops from before. I didn't realize they had shifted to become Knight. But Dom, one of these things that we look at is the firms basically have the ability to kind of restore, hopefully, but then there's the second extortion aspect of it. But what is your thoughts on this
Well,
one?
looking
Right?
at what they're insuring, right? But
Yep.
first of all, what a weird deadline. 308 hours and 2 minutes.
And 2 minutes. Yeah.
Anyways. Yeah, I think, this isn't a cyber insurance, or they don't, according to this, they didn't specify cyber insurance, which is interesting. But I think it really depends on what they actually got, right? Like,
sure,
there are indeed double extortion scenarios where what was stolen, you don't really care, and you can restore and you can function as a business. 600 gigabytes of data for an insurer, who I'm assuming is a rather large one based on what they're insuring, might be nothing. But hopefully they can restore, and then you have to understand what was actually taken, right? And I think in the realm of, if they're insuring large cargo shipments, there's probably some information in there that ought not be publicly available, right? Just in terms of business operations and their competitive rates and the way they underwrite. All of that is what keeps an insurance company competitive. So competitive IP is huge in terms of how they actually write policy. So if I'm them, that's probably what I'm thinking about. And then obviously notwithstanding actual customer data, which
one of the things
is significant for any insurance company.
One of the things that stands out to me is that when we start thinking about this, we have the encryption of the data from a ransom perspective that largely can be restored through restoration, right, through backups. But then you have this data has been exfilled and it could be usable. Why are more people not encrypting data at rest and following basic IG1s, whereby if I was to encrypt my data at rest and it was covered by Azure Rights Management or it was covered by other encryption methodologies, the data exfilled would not be useful? Right? I think that's the point that gets missed a lot, is that we don't see that play out.
You're right, but I think unless I do have a mature data classification concept, but if I'm trying to secure endpoints, I've already unlocked the BitLocker on my machine, right? Because I'm using it.
But I'm more talking about Azure Rights Management and other things that get into actual cloud encryption that doesn't care where that file is. And I understand what you're meaning on the disk encryption. I was more alluding towards, actual cloud encryption and
it would
stuff
be
like that. ARM.
That's why you should tag your documents if you work at Pax8, just in case. You never know.
That's why I'm so happy to have these guests on, and you segued me in here in just a minute pretty damn well, because we do have a lot of those things in place, and we do have tags that would prevent that data from being usable if it was stolen. So I think we have one more article potentially. If not, we can bring our guests on after Robin Harris. I thought so. Okay. Good old D-Link. That is business grade hardware at its finest, right, Dom, if I remember correctly?
Enterprise grade.
Enterprise grade, you might even say. Taiwan-based network equipment vendor D-Link confirmed it was a victim of a recent data breach, dismissed the seeming perpetrator's claims about the severity, right? And this goes back to what you were saying before, Dom. You could get a whole 600 gigs of nothing data. It could be a big old nothing burger. October 1st, an individual using the handle Succumb claimed on the breach forums that she had cyber criminals about having breached the internal network of D-Link in Taiwan. The individual claimed to have exfilled 3 million lines of customer information. So I guess that's not a huge amount of actual data from a size perspective, but not bad data. And source code pertaining to D-Link's DVU network management software. This does include the information of many government officials in Taiwan, as well as the CEOs and employees of the company the hackers breach forum went on to add. Nowhere near as scale as hackers' claims. According to D-Link, the investigation of the incident that had concluded with its internal team from experts at Trend Micro showed that while a breach happened, it was nowhere near the scale the hacker portrayed on breach forums. For one thing, D-Link said the data the hacker obtained was outdated, which I've heard that before. I don't even pull my string on that, and did not contain any personally identifiable information. Number of records the attacker was accessed was only 700 or so, not remotely near the 3 million records. Available evidence suggests the intruder most likely expelled archaic registration retained data from a D-Link system. D-Link said it believes the attacker has gone long unused and outdated data via a successful phishing attack on one of its employees. I want to talk about this for just a sec, right? Like I actually, a good friend of mine does notifications based on Redline malware, right? So Redline is an info stealer that happens to be
Yeah.
very prolific. And so Britain just calls people and says, hey, this is what I've got. And so many people say, oh, old passwords, old data, none of that matters. You've got nothing, when he had plenty, right? And so I don't know if this is actual downplaying by D-Link, or if this is actually, the reality of it. What are your thoughts on this one, Dom?
I don't like the old excuse, right? Like
Yeah, not a
it's
fan.
okay. It's old customers. Fine, that customer has worked with you in 42 million years. How often do you like change your name, email address, and phone number, right? Like, or date of birth, perhaps.
I do
So
it all
I
the
think that
time.
excuse,
Different.
yeah, well, like actually change,
Oh, right.
So
Yes,
I think that excuse is horseshit, frankly, right?
yeah,
Now,
I'm with you.
there is this constant, we kind of touched on it earlier, argument, if you will, of sometimes the threat actor upplays what they've achieved.
Yep.
Right now, and the words are words, but it said 3 million lines. 3 million lines of information could easily only be 700 customers. But
Sure.
so who knows, right? But if I'm a D-Link consumer, I am probably going to take action and assume that my information has been compromised, right? Because
Yep, for sure.
we don't know. But your data doesn't change just because that data has been sitting there for X amount of time.
The piece that triggers me, Dom, is this. Why do they not have appropriate measures in Control 3 in place to delete said data that is old and is not necessary? Right? We talk about data retention. Data retention isn't just data retention. It's data retention and data destruction timelines, right? And I think oftentimes companies fail and have no process or no methodology to actually destroy data that doesn't need to exist anymore. Why would I keep Dom's social if he hasn't been a customer in 20 years? What is that? It only creates risk for me. And I think you start getting into a situation where, that argument adds extra insult in my mind, because it also says they aren't deleting old data, that someone had an archival
and on
file
the flip
sitting
side
in
of
there.
that, like your taxes are only auditable for 7 years. Why the hell would you keep them for 8? Like,
yeah,
it's a joke. Don't call me IRS. I was joking, but like there is benefits to purging data.
You totally joke. I actually have a real world scenario. There was a company that did the giant water mains under a major city, and that's what they did for a living. And they were being sued from a water pipe they put in 1984, and they had to produce records. And the actual case, they would have been wrong. They would have lost the case. But the city didn't have the documents, and the client didn't have the documents either, because we had a strategic deletion of data policy over 7 years old. And so he didn't have the data, and they couldn't hang him with his own data because of it. And so
it wasn't a policy you created after the subpoena showed up.
It was not
pre-existing,
a policy
well-established
subpoena.
Yeah,
no. yeah. Thanks for the clarification, Dom. All right, let's get some brilliant words from Robin Harris as usual, and then we'll pop back in with our awesome guests and continue Cybersecurity Month with our internal security teams.
I want to talk about an employee's duty to stay vigilant. In this day and age, with all the technology and tools and everything that we have, sometimes the weakest link in our security posture is our people. And not only that, sometimes because we haven't taken certain steps, an employee can become a single point of failure. So these are two different things that can happen, but it's all about people. So first, let's talk about employees as a weak link or a strong link. And it's kind of funny, in our environment, you should do phishing campaigns to keep your employees aware, because that is one way, and I know you've seen these emails, even in your personal email inbox. They're phishing. They are phishing. And if you click on that link, oh my goodness. Sometimes all you have to do is click on the link and game over. Companies need to do phishing campaigns. We have tools that are used to do phishing campaigns because we want to keep our employees aware that the bad guys are out there and they're sending all of these emails. And it's kind of funny because in our environment, people have gotten so sensitive. When you send a legitimate email, they'll email, "Is this real?" It's like, should I click on this link? It's like, yes, that's actually your security training email. Yes, go take your training. It's not a phishing campaign. In the old days, we could count on the bad spelling and certain things being off or not making any sense, or it's a bank you don't use. But the bad guys are becoming more sophisticated. I talked about a hack where they got the BlackCat data. So now when they email people about BlackCat, well, they know they're emailing customers who had BlackCat accounts, right? So you're a third party that you do business, they can get hacked, and then your information is being used to then orchestrate phishing campaigns. So you cannot overtrain your employees about security. You can't. And you cannot exclude your management and senior management and C-suite, because the bad guys will target them, specifically target them. Everybody needs to be security aware. That's just the name of the game now. And so here's another risk that people don't think about. And it's where we end up making one employee a single point of failure. And this is interesting. You know, consider if you had this rock star employee that did this one thing and they did it so good and it was so complicated and you haven't bothered to document the process, that if this person is out and this thing needs to be done, it's a oh my goodness moment, right? People are running around like crazy. They don't know how to do it. Only this one person knew how to do it. They don't have the access. Even if they had the access, they don't know how to execute the process. So one of the ways we can mitigate that type of risk is proper documentation that is up to date, cross-training, and making sure it's not just one person that knows how to do this job, and making sure more than one person has credentials into this system that does this really important thing. Because if you are relying on one person, now people use this example about, well, what if such and such gets hit by the bus? Let's not have them get hit by the bus. Let's have them win the lottery. But the point is, they're no longer available. You just got an email, I won the lottery. I just made $20 million. You don't have to mail my stuff. It was nice doing business with you. See ya. What would that do to you if any of your employees, your core employees that did some core functions, would you be able to recover from that quickly? And if the answer to that is no, then you need to address that risk. You need to address that risk. That's employees as the weakest link and employees as a single point of failure. Our employees, I'm an employee. We are part of the value. We are actually, and once we're in our jobs, we are actually assets to our company. But like all assets need to be protected. And we need to make sure we keep our environments safe, and we have contingencies in place for both employees as a risk in security and employees as a single point of failure.
All right.
Man, I could watch those all day.
Yeah.
We need to
for
just
sure.
release them as standalone content items for everyone. to
Or they just
consume.
need to
They're
fire
just
this
so
Matt
good.
and Dom guy and just let her talk all the
Just
time.
let her run the show. Hell yeah.
Yeah, just be done with it. Pretty awesome, though. Well, I'm actually super excited. And you and I wanted to get into a little topic when we bring our guests on, or maybe before, but we've got David back, and we bring in David back from last week. We also have Bill coming in, and I want to let him introduce himself. So let's go ahead and bring them all in, and then we'll get into the discussion. What's up, boys?
How's it going?
It's great to see you again, David. David, you've kind of introduced yourself, but mind refreshing the audience, what you do in your role, and then we'll pop over. And Bill, I'd love for you to give me a few minutes about your background and what you do here, and what your role is on security as well.
David, manager of security operations and balancing team resources around for our various projects.
Very cool. Bill? And you have to introduce your
Hi,
dog
I'm
too, because your dog's on camera,
I
so
know.
it's pretty awesome.
That's my boy Sully. Uh, usually he's the one off camera, and my other one is the one on camera. But he decided to be the photo bomber today. I am Bill Barnard. Let's see here. My background is basically I got into security before there was a security team, and so I started out in network engineering, and thought that the whole security part of it was more sexy, gravitated over to there. And I've been in security for over 20 years now and love it. And, it's my passion. Uh, I've worked at large companies like Costco and REI, and I've been in consulting. I've been a PCI assessor. So I've been the judge and jury of people's security. Um, I came here because one of the things I'm really passionate about is I think the leadership and the strategy of security. I just think there needs to be more of it, and so I came here to be I'm the director of security engineering and operations. So I'm with David. I run tools, so that's tools like our endpoint detection and response, our vulnerability management, eventually our security services edge, which I know we'll talk about later, cloud workload security, those things, and then also run security just in general from anything enterprise-wise, and we're working closely with our engineering team to also do for our platform, our marketplace.
It's awesome. And I love that you talked about that actually, Bill, because so many companies either focus very heavily on one or the other, right? And what I mean by that is they either focus extremely hard on the application security. We're going to bring in Sneak. We're going to get our code right. We're going to deal with the way we handle secrets. We're going to deal with the way we build all this. And that is security. But then they completely neglect the aspect of I'm going to pwn Dom, who's a developer, get his developer keys for AWS, and then I'm going to destroy your little perfectly built application, right? And so you have this other side where some CEOs focus on the security side only being that internal security and let the other aspect lax. And so I'm glad that you brought up both of them because it kind of talks about that well-rounded nature of having to deal with the security and the security of the application, but at the same time, all the little things that go into day-to-day making technology work. Right. And I think, to your point, what we talked about before the show, and Dom, this is where I'd love to let you kick this off. Dom and I were talking about one of our biggest desires and what would make us the happiest on trying to reduce some risk in our organization. Dom, do you want to kick that off?
Yeah, FIDO, right? We've seen a lot of research and on the effectiveness of FIDO. Matt and I use it in the limited capacity we're able to. But I think it has massive benefits, right? It's definitely the most phishing resistant credential out there. So we love using it. It's also easy to use, which helps.
Yeah, and one of the key reasons for this is when you think about it, in cybersecurity, we're telling people that as risk escalates, so too should be the controls escalating, right? And as you start thinking about that, the C-levels, the executives, the directors like yourself, Bill, we're heavily targeted. And when you think about that, we should see an escalation in that risk, reduction from that. And, Dom and I have both been big fans of FIDO2 since it's been introduced. I think you and I both have had at least 20 or 30 YubiKeys in our lives, right? As well as rings and other weird adaptations of this. But why does it matter? For anybody that's playing along at home, here's why it matters. If I do a man in the middle or an AITM or an adversary in the middle attack, so that's like what, three, I think, things. If I do an AITM against you and your primary default setting in Microsoft is to go to a security key, it will fail as soon as you are asked to authenticate. It will fail for a URL callback failure, which means that I was in the middle, and even though it was expecting Microsoft Online, it got Matt Lee's inkedinonline.com, right, that I might be using for my nefarious purposes. And so what happens is there is no phishable way to do that. Now, can you replay a token that's been signed with a FIDO token? Yes, absolutely. Those are still just as attackable as any other OAuth token or OIDC token you're going to hold. But that said, if you make it to where your top level executives have it, you don't necessarily force all of the rank and file to carry around a security token, which is one of the biggest pushbacks, but you do have the most impact reduction for the people that you do choose to be in that FIDO carrying group and that ones that are going to hold those security tokens. And it would definitely be if you have a separation, if you're an MSP out there and you have a separation between your administrative accounts and your non-administrative accounts, which you should, the administrative accounts should certainly be
Please.
targeted by FIDO, right? Yeah. Okay, so that's aside. Wanted to get that out there. If there's an ask, if I was going to be the guy being political, I would say I would love to see FIDO be more and more available all across the board for the methods of sign-in which we use in Pax8, not the ones they are today. I think there's an expansion capability of that. It's one of those where I've got to use it on Cybersecurity Month and ask for it. So thanks for letting us do that, Bill. I want to get that on your radar. So, Bill, you joined us over, and I think one of the things we wanted to ask you is, like, what are you working on right now? What is that next thing that needs to be done that is our next iteration? And I'll set the stage for everybody. Pax8, if I get up on stage and talk about your competitor that's about to start that has fast, flexible, tied to an identity source, consuming SaaS applications, using modern functions where everything's very scalable, that's us, right? We already have that. We've already been AADJ and our Azure Active Directory joined. Sorry for our ding up there. We've already been AADJ and Intune managed and all the things.
Actually,
initial
Entra
access
ID.
policies. Thank you. I'm not doing it.
Sorry, I
Microsoft
had
will
to.
have to send me a formal notice, I suppose. I'll get a note from Kristen tomorrow. She'll be like, "Yo, bro, it's Intra." But true story. But we're already Intra joined, right, in that way. And so, Bill, you're now trying to take it to that next level of protection. Help people understand what you're working on right now, Bill.
Yeah, from a strategic level, one of the first things I identified when I got here, just like you just brought up, is that we are primarily a remote organization. We can work from anywhere, and there is not a lot of perimeter. We can talk about offices and things like that, but the offices are not they're not enclaves anymore like they were.
Yeah, they have no juicy bits in them, right? There's nothing to grab in that regard. It's
Exactly. Everything's up in the cloud, right? We're a SaaS-oriented company. So one of the first things I thought of that I wanted to really do strategically was get Secure Services Edge so that we could, what I like to call, bubble wrap our users. Get them onto secure networking or secure web gateways and ride that traffic all the way to those SaaSes. And in the case of our own cloud infrastructure to those IaaSes and PaaSes so that they're secure. And again, I love the term bubble wrap because we're going to put a wrap around you and make sure that you're all good and safe.
Yeah. And moving to a modern service. Well, moving to a modern service edge is actually really a critical moment for a lot of companies that are in this world, right? And Dom, you and I have ad hoc created our own service edges that we protect ourselves with, right? Through Cloudflare. And I didn't say that, Bill. I have no idea what you're talking about. But we understand there's risk. If I am out in the wild and I'm using public Wi-Fi, there are risks. If I'm out in the wild and I'm working at home, let's just, a threat actor conference probably is more in this case, as it turned out. But you're right, it is a hacker conference. But what's interesting is, like, when I'm at home, I'm under attack constantly by the devices that are on my home network. Those are all risks to us as an organization. And I think wrapping your traffic in bubble wrap, which I'm now going to steal and use, Bill, by the way, this is my bubble wrap SSE, allows you to encapsulate the traffic out to an endpoint and an edge that is the only edge you can access our systems from. And when you think about that, what you're doing is you're forcing a threat actor to have to either go through those same processes to gain access to that service edge and be validated, which is very tough, right? And then also, they're wanting to attack from their own assets. They must be behind some service edge and know enough about us and have the understanding of what are those gates and where am I going to go? So I do love that. Do you have any ideas of what the things you're looking for, Bill? Not to put you on the spot, but in your selection process, what are some of those key components you're looking for in the right service edge?
One of the things is, and so we're challenged with, user acceptance of these kind of things. So it has to be transparent. It cannot be over cumbersome for them. It has to be speedy. We're going into the CIA triad here, the availability side of it. And I'm a security
Go ahead and
guy.
define it. You can't use an acronym without defining it.
Yeah. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And one of the things is I'm a security guy, and I've always hated the fact that the IT and the infrastructure people are only about availability when it's left to the C and the I portion, the confidentiality.
It's yours. 2/3 of it.
However, 2/3 of it, right? But however, in this case, we got to make sure that availability piece of it is fast, transparent, and non-invasive to our end users. And that's one of the things that we're working on. So we're looking at good good speed. The secure web gateways have to have a lot of pops, have to have a lot of throughput to be able to take that traffic and wrap it, and get it going. So that's one thing. Another one is for us to be able to push out our policies. Something that David's really taken point on is looking at the functionality and bringing more functionality. I mean, in my mind, I'm very focused on the secure web gateway, as you can tell, but he's looking at other things like the cloud-based firewalls and the DNS security and those kind of things. So we want extensibility, Matt. That's what we really need.
100%.
We want to grow with the vendors we're going to work with. So that's one thing. And like I said, just making sure that user experience is good for everybody so they use it. They don't know they're using it and they're protected.
You touched on a couple of key aspects of this, right? Like when we get into what Dom and I want to talk about, which is winning hearts and minds, when we get into that aspect of it, this is one of those components. It's knowing your people well enough to know what is going to be that impact to get the hearts and minds. And I think you nailed another component that's so important for me in cybersecurity is you want to make it as much as possible seamless to the user. You want it to just work, right? Brian Krebs says, listen, or Chris Krebs says, make it harder for users to do the wrong thing and easier for users to do the right, right? And when you start thinking about that, talking about the things you just brought up, the transparency aspect, the extensibility, the growth aspect of it is really critical to that end. And then the other part you brought up, which is starting to talk about web firewalls and starting to talk about DNS extensibility outside of that SWG, your software web gateway, you're starting to now get into an understanding that I can now do a better job at all of my controls. And let's talk through it. So 2.3 says address unauthorized software. Well, if I force every bit of traffic through an SWG with a web firewall that allows me to say, no, Matt, you can't go to that website, it's not okay, then we actually can enforce more of that SaaS layer software that falls under 2.1 and 2.3, right, of the software we use. On the other side of it, when you get into 2.1, the enumeration capabilities get much larger because I can now discover where you're going. I can now track those aspects and see what we're actually running up against. You now have an approval process that comes natively with it because I can't use it. Now I have to get it approved. I can use it, right? And so you really have a lot of maturation that comes from bringing that traffic in one place. But it's not new maturation. In fact, it's actually old maturation. What I mean by that is we did this before. We had a pretty little firewall. We had an amazing little gateway that it came out of. We were all in one building drinking coffee from the same crappy coffee place, right? We're all in that same world. So we used to be able to do this quite effectively in office, right? And we're now having to find those other solutions for this delta that we're all finding ourselves in this remote work world, right? And so I think that's one of the topics we kind of wanted to get into is that we are all remote. We're not all in an office where I can have purview and checking things and enforcing things. How do you win hearts and minds in being secure and getting people to do the right thing, right? And that's the topic I'd love to open up for anybody that wants to tackle it first.
Yeah, I'll start because one of the things that I like to do is first it takes somebody in my role. I cannot be I don't want to say no to people. I need to say yes, but so we got to get rid of this ivory tower mindset of security. The next thing is just tell everybody it takes a village. Just like I was saying before, just because you have a security team and security professionals on your, watching everything for you doesn't mean you're secure. It takes everybody. So you tell them like, hey, join on board with this journey. And then it will work for us. You will be protected. We're going to make sure, going back to what you were saying and what Chris Krebs said, we want to make it hard for you to do the wrong thing and easy to do the right thing, but let us help you and join on board with us and understand that we're not here as big brother or anybody to really, put a thumb on you. We're here to enable you. I call it when you roll out these solutions, I call it workforce enablement instead of restrictions. We're making it easier for you to do your job by protecting you.
Yeah, 100%. And we already kind of have a lot of that mantra built in at Pax8 in the sense that we've already made the systems fairly easy to just work, right? You look at it, we have 1,600 plus global employees, and we have like 3 or 4 people in our technical team, right, that manage that. That goes towards what modern architecture and modern infrastructure actually can do and allow for. And now as you introduce these security features, what's also great about that is you can do them in the same exact Lego way, right? At the end of the day, when you're using Office 365 or Okta or Ping or whatever it may be, and you're bolting those into these solutions, they have a predictable behavior that you can test in a lab very easily, especially with SaaS software. So it makes it very easy for us to succeed in that regard. When it comes to hearts and minds, though, I think the challenge and the title of this show that I want to lean into is the employee's duty to stay secure. We say that as a way of opening this, and duty being this understanding of it's less about a duty to stay secure, and in my opinion, more of an understanding that we all want to protect this company. We all enjoy working for this. We all believe in our mission. We all know what we're trying to accomplish, and we have to stop the things that are in the way of our mission. And as an employee, it is our job to stay secure. It is our job to respond and work with our security team. It is our job to try to take our habits and be better. So what are some of the things that you see employees failing at that duty? Maybe we focus on that side of it. Dom, can you come up with a time or a type of an example where an employee fails at meeting that need from a security perspective? I can. I have 40 pictures of them this year.
Well, that's the not locking your computer is a big one. I've Nick caged many a humans in our office this year. That means that their background is Nick Cage, in case
and
anyone
not a
needs
fully
to know.
dressed.
That's
Nick
not an
Cage
Urban
probably
Dictionary
either.
thing.
Yeah.
Often not. Maybe a vampire Nick Cage works really well.
That's always a good one.
But I think it's that entire idea, like the very bare basics of security hygiene, right? Like if my social media were compromised, you could start to learn a lot more about me, and you could start to guess at some other aspects of my life, right? So I think personal security for me is one. We train people, we get them to do all the right things at work, but then they do the wrong things at home, and then they're an unfortunate victim of, like, say, blackmail, right? Like there's all of these outside issues that really influence. And this was a huge topic in the DoD space, right? We spent almost more time training on outsider threats that were not attacking the DoD, but are attacking the people that work for the DoD, and blackmail them, or other victimhood type incidents. And then you create an inside threat, right? So I think I really love educating users about, hey, you got all this stuff at work, we taught you all this, but like, what about your personal email? Right? Those very basic things.
Yeah. There's actually an example of this right now playing out. Dragos, 3 months ago, had an employee that they brought on that when he onboarded, he was already compromised. He already had threat actors in his core system. And when they sent him his credentials to sign on for the first time, guess what? Threat actor signed on and started actually accessing data. And the only reason they found it was they had great access controls in place that showed the denials when they kept trying to touch assets as they were enumerating, right? And they wouldn't have found it otherwise. But to your point, that person didn't do their due care and got compromised at home and brought that to be the destruction of a company, right? And I think that's one I wouldn't have thought of, Dom. So one Dom point at this point. Bill, can you think of anything where employees fail to take that due care and due diligence on?
Yeah, I wanted to follow on with what Dom said. One of the things that you go to social media when people post a lot of stuff about themselves, like you said, they're open books. Like one of the things I have to tell my wife when we're on vacation is do not post pictures of us in Europe, because you've just opened us up for attack in our home,
especially not in the moment.
Right.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, you can do it when you get home.
Right.
In general, I think a lot of people don't like. One of the things is like try to be more private, and when I say that is like on the mechanism, we're on the system. It's the same way with privacy. We treat privacy like it's wide open, and the world treats privacy like, hey, I'm going to be careful about telling you that. One of the things that people do, I think, a lot, and this is regional here to North America, but we will just let everybody know all kinds of stuff about us. That, like, don't do that. You are giving the bad actors more to be able to get closer and closer and hack your bank accounts, hack whatever. Like, be very careful with your data about yourself.
Yeah, 100%. David, let's ask you for one. What are the things where an employee can be more diligent? And I know you have a pet conversation that's your favorite go-to, but I was just curious. What are your thoughts on this, brother?
More awareness for social engineering. That's going to be probably my biggest one.
So what is social engineering, David? Help me understand that.
Anyone just trying to talk their way into the system. trying to get users to do things that they're not supposed to do. Usually there's a lot of emotion behind it. That there is, I think it was either DEF CON or BlackCat. There's a pretty
It was
famous
DEF
one
CON.
of a lady in the sound box playing
Yep.
the crying baby noise on her phone
Yep.
while she's on the phone with AT&T, getting them, or someone else, like getting them to change the contact information on some account or whatever. That's one that really stuck with me for a very long time. I'm sitting here
Yeah,
talking about it, so yeah, it's still with me.
I remember that one, and what it goes towards is human emotion, right? One of the things that's interesting
Yeah.
about us is we often think emotionally, not rationally, right? That's a human, and if you've ever not done that, then good on you. I certainly have reacted emotionally, right, Claire? But you can see things where you're not necessarily being logical in your thoughts. And so what's interesting about social engineering is it does attack that directly, right? It takes advantage of that. And to your point, David, I remember that she had a little phone. She was on the phone with AT&T, and she starts playing the crying baby noise on the phone, right? She's like, I got to get back to my baby. I'm so sorry. I'm so flustered. And what do people want to do? They want to be the savior. They want to help. And so they try to help. And most recently, this has played itself out. Yeah, it's the hero aspect of it. And most recently, this played out just in the MGM attacks, right? And in the Caesars attacks. Those were basically situations where someone called into the help desk and said, I'm Johnny. I need to get connected to the VPN. Please help me. I can't get connected to the VPN. Once that happened, infrastructural enumeration occurred, and everything we know that came out of that happened. So ultimately, you're right, David, is that people need to be better trained and better aware of those social engineering. And I think there's actually a challenge there because it takes empowerment. And here's why. If you think about it, when I get a call to action from a social engineering perspective, I am trying to solve something quickly for someone. I may not in certain companies have the luxury of saying, I'm not helping you with this right now. I can't validate your identity. I can't do what I need to do. I'm sorry, I can't help you. Most people aren't empowered necessarily to take a stand and take an action when something doesn't seem right. And their only goal and the only thing they're measured on is a KPI on a support desk for how quickly they respond to something. And I say all that to say, I think it's the company's job to actually empower people to not fall for social engineering, to give people that time to wait. One of the biggest things around social engineering is it always comes with an imperative timeline, right? It always comes with I have to do this now. I need you right now. It's a big, important thing. And they try to get that call to action to be imperative so you don't have time to think, right? And I think to your point, where do employees often fail? I think it's in being in the training. It's in doing the training. I think I could only imagine, David, as you look at these numbers on training, how few people are taking their micro trainings, how few people lean into that and are actually getting it done and require chasing it down or internal stunts to try to drive leadership. I mean, if you remember Chris Sharp last year did, be better than Sharpie, right? And it was, he told everyone in Australia that he could be better at the cybersecurity tests and quizzes than anybody else. And what did it do? All of Australia got up to the mark, right? And so you start getting down
still
that. So
won,
Bill,
though.
I think he did
Just saying.
win. Yeah, he may have cheated, but he won. I'm calling you a cheater there, Sharpie. Love you, geez. Bill, this is the question I want to pose to you. How much of it is in your hands to empower people to be able to do the right thing? How much is it in leaders' hands to drive culture of cybersecurity?
I think a lot of it. I mean, when you think about it, one of the roles that we have is to, encourage and talk about it. And, one of the things we can do as leaders is not overwhelm everybody with all of our acronyms, which you guys already caught me on.
Fair.
I think one of the best things to do is to simplify the message and get it out to everybody. When I'm like, I do this to myself all the time. I call a timeout, throw a flag on myself, and start to say, how can I get this conversation? How can I make somebody understand what I'm saying and not make it be a bunch of acronym speak or whatever? That's one of the ways that we can do it, is because we can, once we get it into that more palatable, easy to understand vernacular, if you will, we can start, then it resonates. The other thing you see me do is I look for analogies to get them by, I want to empower them by making something like the bubble wrap we talked about earlier, make it sound easier for them to understand. And then the other thing too is I'll go back to this like I'm pedantic as hell, is I just want to tell everybody, it's up to everybody. You're part of this. It's like, not segmented off to us, the people that think about security. Right. You're part of this. Like, become part of it, and do the microservices. Like, test yourself. Be vulnerable to make mistakes and fail, and like call it out, and do those kind of things, and then tell people those stories, like what you did, and make it funny, and joke around about how you screwed something up, and all of those things. I think that's how we can empower these people and our people in general to really take that ownership.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there that was really awesome. The first one being the nomenclatural barriers we set up for ourselves. Like, if somebody was going to try to tell me that is a preloaded stress truss bridge suspended on cables that are pressed down, no, it's a freaking bridge. Like, just tell me it's a bridge. It gets me across the stupid water. Like, I don't need all that. And yet, for some reason, as engineers and as practitioners, we find a hard time separating it down into that distillable, meaningful thing to people that aren't practitioners.
So we're nerdy about our topic, right? Like, we love talking about the ones and the zeros and the bits and the bytes, and it's fun.
The nerdy bits.
So it takes a lot of training and experience to get yourself to have the business and the very human conversation.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. I always tell Dave, by the way, I always tell him, like, one of the things that upsets me the most is when somebody does like a Rube Goldberg project in security. I'm like, you just made it overly complex. Like, don't ever do that. Like, simplify. So, wholehearted.
We're going to have this trigger do this, and then this thing's going to go over here, and it's going to run down this one little chute down to this ladder, and then, 100%. I get it.
It's like a demented game of chutes and ladders, It's impossible.
The other piece that I want to talk on, and I think this is really important, is a concept called social proof. Social proof is a concept in psychology that was kind of invented in the 80s in Great Britain. And it's this kind of statement that says, if Dom Kirby spoke the language of a citizenry, of a location, but had never been exposed to their people, practices, things they did, none of the stuff, just dropped in a new culture, able to speak. Almost instantly, Dom would do the things that people around him did. He would be on buses, he would wear pants, he would be going to eat at the restaurants, he would be doing all the things following people around him, because we as humans, our nature puts us that way, or we've never found ourselves around a campfire together. We'd have never teamed up to become societies, right? We're wired that way. And what's interesting about social proof is it says if you reward the positive behaviors, people will do that. Well, when we think about phishing, and everybody in the audience right now, you've all done it because I've done it. How many of you have gone after a phishing exam gone, I got Johnny. Look, Johnny failed. We got Johnny. Johnny needs to be better. Let's go teach Johnny. Right? But in reality, thank you. All of us, right? But in reality, what if we, instead of focusing on Johnny, focused on Sally and Bill and the other 90% of people that did not click on that, the ones that were the heroes? Even in the title of this, there was a comment in our run of show that said, our people are our weakest link. That is not true. Our people are our strongest link. One of them fails and we fail. But in reality, people actually do the right thing most of the time. People actually do respond to security threats and think twice and not click and talk to security, right? David, how many times have you gotten people sending in phishing emails that weren't phishing emails, or they were, but people are sending them out to you and asking you to look at them, right?
The time.
Yeah. And I think the point is we need to focus on that. And we as an industry need to change the way we talk. And we need to start saying we are actually really good. Our people are trainable. They are able to grow through these challenges and learn new tech and new ways of being secure. And I think at the same time as Bill, to your point, we're making things easier for them to do it. We're making it harder for them to fail. We're giving them more tools. We've got the cool phishing report button that makes it really easy. Those two coming together provide a really good strategy for getting employees to do the right thing and be vigilant. Maybe vigilant? I don't think vigilant's a word, but being vigilant. Right? Yeah, I thought it wasn't vigilant, so we're probably okay. But I do think that we need to focus on positive.
Sounds like an acronym, but I'm not going to expand on it. We'll talk about that.
It's probably. Can anybody add anything to that of how we as a company try to focus on the positive and try to drive the wins in our world from a security perspective, and maybe even how we could be better as a conversation?
I could add that one of the things that I found in my time here is how great and strong the culture is. And I think one of the things we do is really build that culture. And this is part of that culture. It's like, say, hey, part of our culture is how much you love this company and how much you want to protect it. Like you said, Matt,
Amen.
is to Yeah, and that it's part of like securing this because we've got bigger things ahead of us, and this is and I truly believe and just say hey, and it's going to take being vigilant and secure and having your spidey sense on to go forward and make this place even greater than it already is.
Dude, the auditors are in the room. I can hear them. It always gets me a little nervous when the
Yeah,
auditors
they're
start
fall
talking in Dom's
breaks.
background.
I'm really getting
Yeah.
audited here today.
It's a tough one. And one of the things that I think sticks out in that from an employee culture perspective is once you have that culture of people that do want to do the right thing and you've empowered those and you've talked about it and you have an energy of positivity, it's really easy to guide those. I said this in the beginning. There's never been a dog trainer that beat their dog into being a good dog. There is no occasion where beating a dog makes them a better dog. It doesn't. Loving a dog, rewarding the positives, being positive when they do the right thing so you can tell them they're doing the right thing. Those are all attributes of training an amazing dog. And I'm not trying to correlate all of our Pax8 employees to dogs, but I will say as humans, we're no different. I lean in when someone gives me reward. I run away when people punch me. I don't try to put myself in that scenario. And so it's really interesting when you have a good culture that's already ready and primed with all that positivity, which we really are. Like that's one of the great things about Pax8 is it's a really positive environment. You can easily guide that dog into doing amazing things, right? And having a much brighter future in that way. So I think it's been a fantastic thing. We're getting towards the end of this episode about employees, responsibility and opportunity to protect the organization. I'd like to ask each of you if you have any closing thoughts, and then Dom, you can close us out.
Just that from my perspective, it takes like keeping going. I'll go back to it takes a village. We're all here for you, and the other thing too is please reach out and ask us any questions. We're here for you. You have security questions. If you have something that you saw was like maybe it was interesting, or you want say if you see something, say something, bring it to us. We're here to help you iron that out.
I love it, David.
Same thing as Bill. Send me everything. Wake me up. It is important.
I actually do.
Honest.
I do want to harp on that because there's some security teams where it is not okay to contact. It is not seen as a positive thing. And I've had to come to you, and unfortunately, y'all have had to come to me a couple times. But it's been very approachable and very, to your point, Bill, let's try to get through this. Let's figure out what the next steps are. Let's assess where we are and see what the next things we can do to help you. Tom, what are your thoughts right now, buddy?
I think everyone hit the nail on the head. We need to encourage collaborating with your cyber teams, right? They cannot do what they do without you. I think it's the most important thing to drive home. And we have a great one, right? As we kind of showcase over these last few episodes, they are approachable. They are willing to collaborate with you and talk to you. And you're not gonna get a huge slap on the wrist if you fail a phishing test. In fact, I failed a phishing test at Pax8, and I immediately put it on LinkedIn because I thought it was funny. And that's that culture we have. And if you're building that, if you're a security team or if you're an MSP, you need to be building that positive security culture so the people are actually encouraged and want to work with you to be better at that. Before we cut out, we do have to do the flag. So if you're a Pax8er, this is your moment. If we could get the flag up, it will be. You're going to need this one in the chat, I promise you. So it will be pasted in the chat. This one's a tough one.
Dash dot.
Looks like a Fatboy Slim song, I think. Anyone know that song? Good, I'm not alone here. That is this week's flag. Like I said, Claire is going to be putting that in the chat for you so you can copy paste that directly into the CTF. Matt, any thoughts before we shut her down?
Nope. I think it's just one of those things. I hate that we have 1 month a year we think about cybersecurity. You know me, I've got the volleyball at home that I talk to when nobody else wants to talk cyber. But ultimately,
yeah, I got one too.
It's great. And I do want to continue to say, if you have an internal security team, this is one of those months where it's time to thank them and highlight them and talk about the things they do for you and build the culture in your organization. Focus inward and actually celebrate those wins and those awesome humans. And I just want to, as always, close this out by saying thank you to you two. I very, very much care about the success of all of our partners that depend on us to care about our security. And I think it's really awesome to have an amazing team here with us. So thanks for being here with us, guys.
Thanks so much, guys. Thank you. This has been another fantastic show. Thanks so much for joining us on this Cybersecurity Month episode. Wow, something just happened to the production. And
That was
completely
weird.
threw off my
I was
train
like,
of
I
thought.
see myself.
That's my bad.
Okay, I digress.
Anyways, thanks so much for joining us. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Don't forget to hit up Pax8Beyond.com. I got to talk about Beyond a lot this week. The early bird price will go away in January. There will be no extending it. Lots of people are signing up. Don't miss your chance to get your seat. And with that, we will see you next week.